Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 129 based on novel. So let's start. Haha, in that case, Bai Yi, the clan leader, will give you the important task of winning Xiao Yan. You must not miss it. Bai Ying solemnly looks at Bai Yi in front of him, and his face looks very serious. Hearing the speech, Bai Yi couldn't help but tighten up slightly in his heart, and the look on his face changed slightly. He didn't expect that his patriarch would promise Sun Shuo to make such a decision. Based on Bai Yi's understanding of Bai Ying in front of him, his clan leader is not the kind of person who is willing to suffer losses. After all, this is the territory of the Sun family. If he doesn't recognize the Sun family at that time, the Bai family may be confused. At the same time, Sun Shuo behind Bai Ying looked at Bai Ying with his back to him at the moment, and his face was also suspicious. Bai Ying in front of him has been fighting with his Sun family for many years. Sun Shuo knows very well about the latter's mind. This man in front of him is not a willing owner. Once he is the prey he is staring at, even if he can't kill it and doesn't tear off a piece of meat, he will never be willing. However, at present, Bai Ying would say these words in front of her, which really had to make him doubt. At the same time, Bai Yi in front of Bai Ying also hesitated to speak, but then Bai Ying spoke again with a dignified face, saying, Bai Yi, only you can take over this matter. It's related to the face of my Bai family. Do you want to push it off? Once you push it off, this man surnamed Sun will have prestige. Won't he laugh at me that there are no people in my Bai family? Bai Ying's words fell. Bai Yi in front of him also solemnly lowered his head. He had to nod to Bai Ying reluctantly. After all, it was the decision of the owner. He had no right to change or refute. Seeing this, Bai Ying nodded and smiled. However, Bai Yi, who lowered his head, had not found it. At the moment, a touch of pure light flashed in the depths of Bai Ying's eyes. But clan leader, this is the territory of the Sun family. He occupies the power of people. If Sun Shuo sends more people, won't we suffer the same loss? After a little hesitation, Bai Yi raised his head. At the same time, Bai Ying's face quickly returned to normal. With a smile, he smiled at Bai Yi in a voice that only two of him could hear and said, Bai Yi, your words are certainly good, but do you think I can't think of it since it's something you can think of? Hearing the speech, Bai Yi woke up. At the same time, his face quickly changed. He quickly bowed to Bai Ying and apologized, saying, My subordinates are stupid and have no intention of belittling the patriarch. Ha ha, it doesn't hurt. I also know you are for the good of the family, so. Bai Ying turned abruptly before his words fell. He looked at Sun Shuo instantly, narrowed his eyes, and said to Sun Shuo Ning. However, clan leader Sun, I think that before that, there is one thing that needs to be explained to you. Sun Shuo raised his eyebrows and knew what Bai Ying was going to say, but he looked like he didn't know. He smiled and asked knowingly, Hey, what's wrong with the Bai leader? Bai Yi and I are the only people in the Bai family now. If I don't do it, he is the only one. Therefore, if you send someone from the Sun family, you should. There is no one in your Bai family, but you can't blame me. This is my Sun family. As long as I want to send as many as I want. If the Bai leader has this ability, he won't stop him. Bai Ying's voice didn't fall, but Sun Shuo snorted coldly and interrupted it with a sneer. You. Suddenly, an angry look appeared on Bai Ying's face. The original kind expression suddenly became a little distorted and ferocious at this moment. A pair of palms extending out their sleeves and robes also trembled violently. In his eyes, he was almost angry. Seeing this, Sun Shuo smiled coldly, and the corners of his mouth rose, revealing a sneer. Then he waved his big hand fiercely, his sleeves and robes stirred, hunting sounded, and an invisible strong wind swept through the courtyard. Listen to me, everyone in my Sun family. From now on, all the 9-star and half emperors will go to the Sifang Pavilion and catch the third-order herbalist, Xiao Yan, for me. Whoever can catch him, I will reward him with a third-order pill. No, two. Sun Shuo shouted loudly. Suddenly, the whole Hanshi city came to the world like thunder at the moment. The words of Sun Shuo exploded in everyone's ears in the city. In the twinkling of an eye, the hearts of everyone in the city were deeply shocked by Sun Shuo's words. From these words, we can clearly hear that Xiao Yang, who is listed as the most wanted by the 4 major gates, is now in his Hanshi city. Moreover, Xiao Yang seems to be in the Sifang Pavilion in the city. Suddenly, there was a sense of greed in the hearts of all the semi-imperial strongmen in the city. They are also very excited about the reward offered by the 4 main gates, but they are helpless to find Xiao Yan. Since he has appeared here now, how can the people in the city easily miss the opportunity to seize him? In a twinkling of an eye, not only the Sun family's 9.5 emperors in the city obeyed orders, but also the strong people from all over the city. At the moment, Xiao Yan is in the Sifang Pavilion. This is Sun Shuo's personal words and will never be false. In just a few breaths, such a big Hanshi city quickly became chaotic because of Sun Shuo's words at the moment. Of course, to say that it is chaotic is also chaotic, but to say that it is orderly, all the people in the city are converging in one direction of the city with the same goal. If this scene is seen from a high altitude, it can really be called grand. Countless strong men poured out their fighting spirit one after another, and the fighting light columns went straight to the sky. Then, the people moved and twinkled one after another, leaving a gorgeous shadow in the sky. Tens of thousands of people, with the same action, gathered rapidly towards the same place in the city. From a high altitude, it was like that countless fireflies were attracted by something. They poured in madly. The light at the most central point also gradually became bright and beautiful. At the same time, in the Sifang Pavilion, Sun Hun, who had stood in front of Xiao Yang with a respectful face, was also frightened. At the same time when Sun Shuo's words came from his mouth, the original idea in Sun Hua's heart was like a cloud and burst. At the bottom of his heart, it was unbelievable. He could not imagine that the 3-level herbalist who could lead him to the top was Xiao Yang, who wanted to be killed by the 4 major sects together. You are. How possible? Sun Hun looked at Xiao Yang in front of him with a frightened face. His eyes quickly became red. His thin body trembled violently at this moment. Today's fingers slowly pointed to Xiao Yang. Although the reward given by Sun Shuo can impress ordinary people, he is not moved at all. If the person in front of him is not Xiao Yang, he can get much more third-order pills than Sun Shuo promised at the moment. However, now everything has come to naught. Xiao Yang grinned with irony and disdain. Yes, the person your master refers to is me, Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang. In the Sifang Pavilion, Sun Hua's body trembled violently, and the words in his mouth almost jumped out of his teeth. It sounded full of anger and suppressed the sadness in his heart. Poof! When the anger in his chest burned to the extreme, Sun Hua's vigorous fighting spirit broke out at this moment. At the same time, the anger in his chest turned into endless killing intention. Death. Since I can't get anything, I'll kill you today. I'm going to tear you to pieces today. The hoarse roar in his mouth came out like a beast roar. Sun Hun showed his teeth and looked particularly terrible. Drink. With a hoarse roar, Sun Hua's body suddenly burst out, like a shell, shooting at Xiao Yang close at hand. The dark green fighting spirit condensed rapidly on Sun Hun's body surface. In a twinkling of an eye, it turned into a solid armor and wrapped his whole body. Sharp spikes are scattered all over the armor, especially sharp. When crossing the void, dark cracks are left in the surrounding void. The invisible strong wind sweeps across the hall like a sharp blade, and the popping sound resounds continuously. At this moment, no matter under his feet or on his head, or other ornaments in the compartment, they were all turned into pieces under the blow of Sun Hun. The power of destroying the withered and decaying makes people feel shocked. However, at this moment, Xiao Yang, who stands in front of Sun Hun, is unmoved, and even a faint sneer lingers in the bottom of Xiao Yang's heart. Ha ha! Suddenly, a faint cold laughter came out of Xiao Yang's mouth. When Sun Hua was full of anger, Xiao Yang raised his palm. His actions seemed slow and rapid, slow and urgent, with residual shadows. Seeing that Xiao Yang's face showed a sneer-like look, Sun Hua was even more angry. A hoarse roar was sent out again in his throat. The power of his body became more terrible. But the next moment, dang! Xiao Yang's palm fluttered lightly and fell on the armor covered with sharp thorns in front of him. The light palm stopped Sun Hun, who was fiercely rushed in front of him, with a very relaxed palm. The appearance of this scene made Sun Hun's face suddenly become frightened under the armor. When he looked up, he saw that Xiao Yang's face was still calm. Sun Hun in front of him didn't seem to bring him any substantive pressure. Even in the latter's view, the blow with all his strength was simply vulnerable in Xiao Yang's view. How possible? Sun Hun's eyes were full of beads and almost jumped out of his eyes. The expression on his face was idle and frightened. When his throat rolled, cold sweat poured out of Sun Hun's whole body and immediately soaked his clothes. In this regard, Xiao Yang's face showed a sneer, and his dark eyes were full of disdain. Although Sun Hun is a 9-star and a half emperor in front of him, It is not in Xiao Yang's eyes at the moment. The fighting spirit is flashy, floating, and the armor is loose. It's almost vulnerable. In my opinion, the strength of your 9-star and half-emperor mostly depends on foreign things. Hearing the words in Xiao Yang's mouth, Sun Hua suddenly felt a huge shock in his heart. Under his armor, the look on his face also became extremely frightened. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yang in front of him was so terrible that his strength as a 9-star and half-emperor actually only made him break through reluctantly by consuming a lot of pills 6 months ago, but it is precisely because of this that his strength will not improve in the future. Hihi, with your strength, I don't say much. At most, it can only be comparable to the peak of the late 8-star and half-emperor. If you change to a 9-star and half-emperor trained through normal channels, even if you just break through, you can easily clean up you. Xiao Yang's merciless sarcastic words were inserted into Sun Hua's heart like sharp thorns, which made Sun Hua's face under his armor quickly become ferocious. But even so, how can you stop me like this? The voice in his mouth roared silently. Sun Hua's body moved violently. Under the cover of armor, he punched Xiao Yang's head. The fighting spirit is condensed, and the power on the arm covered by armor is more terrible. Even the void collapses at this moment. Xiao Yang sneered. Now he can even solve the strong ones in the later stage of the 9-star and half-emperor, let alone the guy in front of him who can't even be called the 9-star and half-emperor. Slow, too slow. In the face of Sun Hun's action again, Xiao Yang's evaluation is only a short 4 words. At the next moment, Xiao Yang's outstretched palm turned slightly, and then the gorgeous fire in his eyes flashed past, and with a bang, Sun Hun's body in front of him was shocked back by Xiao Yang. Rattan Thorn. Sun Hun, who was shocked back, was still unwilling to be outdone. His internal fighting spirit tilted wildly and quickly condensed into dark green sharp spikes in the surrounding void. The sharp thorn rotates and reflects a cold luster like sword light. Kill. Sun Hua gnashed his teeth and roared. While stabbing and shooting, Sun Hua's body quickly turned into a dark green light and shadow and shot at Xiao Yang at top speed. A sharp stab pierced the void and formed an encirclement. It shot at Xiao Yang quickly. Xiao Yang could not avoid it in this narrow space. Seeing this, Xiao Yang raised a sneer at the corners of his mouth. His eyes didn't look at the sharp stabs, but at a certain moment, his body suddenly twisted, and a whip leg hit the void on one side. Bang! Suddenly, the terrible force poured out like a mountain torrent. At the same time, Sun Hun, dressed in armor, also suddenly appeared in the originally empty void, hitting Xiao Yang's fierce blow. As soon as the blow fell, Sun Hun's face suddenly became very frightened, and his eyes were full of endless terror. However, Xiao Yang didn't give him a chance to breathe, because his soul power has been clearly aware that many strong people have gathered outside the Xifeng Pavilion. I'm afraid the semi-imperial strong people in the whole Hanshi city have gathered here. Under the exploration of Xiao Yang's soul power, some of these people are more than 10, 9 and a half emperors, and there are countless strong semi-emperors at other levels. As for the strong fighting emperor, perhaps because of the relationship between Bai Ying and Sun Shuo, they didn't start, but looked at the situation in the field from a distance. Aware of the many strong people outside, Xiao Yang couldn't help but tighten his heart. Unexpectedly, for him alone, he could attract the people of the whole city to catch him. I'm afraid there would be no shortage of strong people fighting the emperor if it weren't for the relationship between the two. It seems that we can't delay any more. He whispered a sentence in a low voice. Xiao Yang immediately set his cold eyes on Sun Hun, who was blown out at the moment. The corners of his mouth raised a cold and piercing smile. He immediately moved his body. Once Chenjua's step was performed, Xiao Yang immediately appeared beside Sun Hun. The golden light in his eyes, Xiao Yang's body also soared rapidly. Vaja glazed body. Bang! Outside the Xifeng Pavilion where countless people gathered, people came like meteors and lightning. However, at a certain moment, the Xifeng Pavilion in the eyes of everyone was suddenly destroyed by a terrible force. The powerful force broke out from the Xifeng Pavilion in the shocked eyes of everyone in the field, and destroyed the whole Xifeng Pavilion in just a moment. When the huge buildings fell down, the dazzling golden columns of light were like the light emitted by the sun. Everyone who saw this scene couldn't help closing their eyes. At the same time, before the square pavilion completely collapsed, the people in it quickly turned into streamers and quickly flew out of it. When people looked up again, the dazzling golden light gradually diminished. Soon, what slowly appeared in front of them was a giant. At this moment, a figure that looks a little embarrassed is emitting a thin layer of dark green fighting spirit light on the body surface. With the eyesight of everyone present, we can clearly see that those dark green fighting spirit are condensing into a pair of armor. However, the armor looked at the moment, but the whole body had been filled with conspicuous cracks. On the armor in front of his chest, you could clearly see a depression, which was caused by Xiao Yang's whip leg. At this moment, the golden giant standing in front of everyone is Xiao Yang, who shows the body of King Kong Glass. Anyway, sooner or later, his body will be exposed. Therefore, Xiao Yang at the moment doesn't care too much about these people's greedy eyes. He has seen too much of these. Cough. Under the armor, Sun Hun's white face was full of fear. He could not imagine that the strength of the 9-star-and-half emperor he was proud of would appear so unbearable in front of Xiao Yang. Is it true that he is as weak as Xiao Yang said? No, it's not that Sun Hun is too weak, but now Xiao Yang's real strength is too terrible. Relying on the strength of the 6-star-and-half emperor, we can defeat the strong in the later stage of the 9-star-and-half emperor. Sun Hun is really not enough in front of him. Therefore, we can't blame Sun Hun's weakness. We can only say that the opponent he faces is too strong. Cough. While coughing violently in his mouth, Sun Hu's whole body couldn't help shaking violently. However, when he looked at Xiao Yang, his expression became more and more resentful. Cough. Xiao Yang. Today, even if I lose my life, I will kill you. If I can't get what I want, you don't want to leave. At the same time, when the voice of extremely hoarse words fell, Sun Hun's whole body expanded rapidly. As soon as the armor on the body surface disappeared, the dry wrinkled skin quickly cracked red cracks, and the dazzling red blood gushed out quickly. Together with the fighting spirit in his body, he also became violent at this moment. Look at this, Sun Hun obviously wants to explode. Seeing this scene, the look on the face of a semi-imperial strongman in the surrounding sky also changed suddenly at this moment. Unexpectedly, before Xiao Yang caught it, Sun Hun had offered such a great gift to them. Madman. This guy is a madman. Back off. The madman is going to explode. Back off. Suddenly, a scream of panic spread over the void. The crowd just gathered around the Sifang pavilion ran away like frightened sheep at this moment. The empty space of Hanshi City immediately became a pot of porridge. Joking, Sun Hua is also a 9-star-and-half emperor for good or bad. Although his own strength is inconsistent with that of the 9-star-and-half emperor, as long as he can get involved with the 9-star-and-half emperor, Sun Hua's strength will not be much weaker. If he explodes at the moment, even those 9-star-and-half emperors present will not be spared. However, when everyone in the sky was panicking about it, Xiao Yang sneered in his heart. At the same time, his huge golden palms suddenly clenched, and the clanging sound of gold and iron collision immediately came up in the void. At the same time, in panic, everyone's eyes were once again attracted by Xiao Yang in front of his eyes. I let you explode. At the moment when the cold and disdainful low cry came from Xiao Yang's mouth, the golden giant fist, with the most terrible power, ruthlessly tore up the void. In the blink of an eye, it had severely bombarded Sun Hun, who was extremely swollen. Bang! The earth-shaking roar echoed over the Hanshi city. Xiao Yang's fist directly exploded a large area of emptiness. Sun Hua, who was hit by Xiao Yang, dispersed the fighting spirit of the riot in his body, which was directly out of Sun Hua's control, which passively prevented Sun Hua's attempt to explode. One punch fell, and Sun Hun's body immediately flew out uncontrollably, like a broken sack. A large amount of blood gushed from where he passed. Finally, Sun Hun, who was as angry as a hairspring, accidentally fell heavily in front of the main hall of Sun's house. In the huge courtyard, with Sun Hun's fall, a loud bang, he severely hit a huge pit. At this time, a group of the Sun family also looked at the Sun confused who had fainted in the pit, especially the Sun Shoro, the head of the Sun family. The look on his face looked even more ugly at the moment. It would be fine if it only happened in front of his Sun family, but what annoys Sun Shoro most now is that the owner of the Bai family is right in front of him. This is Sun Hun. At this time, Bai Yi behind Bai Ying suddenly appeared a shocked color on his face. His eyes stared at the fainting figure in the huge pit. His words were full of unbelievable blindly. Why, is this guy also a 9-star-and-a-half emperor? Seeing the shocked look on Bai Yi's face, Bai Ying couldn't help being curious. He gently picked his eyebrow and asked Bai Yi. Yes, he is also a 9-star-and-a-half emperor in the early stage. Although I have never fought with him, there is no doubt about this. But I didn't expect that he would become like this in such a short time. He nodded. Bai Yi looked at Sun Hun in the pit with a lingering fear on his face. He couldn't help feeling a chill on his back. The person who did it didn't have to think about it. Of course, it was Xiao Yang, but Bai Yi didn't expect that Sun Hun would lose so quickly and miserably. It's hard to imagine that if Sun Hun was replaced by him, he must be lying in this pit at the moment. I'm afraid it's his white leaf. Thinking of this, Bai Yi's heart is full of cold. Oh. Hearing Bai Yi's words, Bai Ying's face was surprised. It was only 2 or 3 hours since he received Bai Yi's message. In such a short time, Xiao Yang quickly defeated a 9-star and a half emperor. Moreover, since Sun Hu didn't recognize Xiao Yang's identity at the beginning, perhaps the time it took Xiao Yang to defeat Sun Hu was much shorter than Bai Ying thought at the moment. With this in mind, Bai Ying's face changed instantly. At the same time, in his heart, he also felt a shock for Xiao Yang. To defeat a 9-star and a half emperor in such a short time, Xiao Yang's combat power can only be described by the word terror. After all, as far as he knows, Xiao Yang's cultivation level has not exceeded the 9-star and a half emperor. However, then, in the depths of Bai Ying's eyes, a very faint light flashed again. When he looked up at Sun Shuro, a smile also flashed away at the corners of Bai Ying's mouth. This change was less than a moment, but Sun Shuro didn't find it at all. Ha ha, brother Sun Shuro, I didn't expect your Sun family to be beaten back so soon. I'm really surprised. Is it difficult? Is your Sun family so strong? But as far as I know, this is also a 9-star and half emperor. How can he be so weak? Is it possible that your Sun family's strong practice depends on the accumulation of pills? Bai Ying nudged his chin, pointed to Sun Hun in the huge pit, and said with a sneer. Hearing this, Sun Shuro's face became extremely gloomy at this moment. The palm under the cover of his sleeve and robe suddenly clenched into a fist, and his whole body was almost furious and trembling violently. At this time, Bai Ying laughed again, and his words seemed to be exhortation. Brother Sun Shuro, I know your Sun family is the bottom of the 4 families, but it's too cheap for you to use this method. This practice will do harm to your Sun family in the future. Brother Sun, you should listen to your brother's advice and accept your crooked ways earlier. Bai Ying laughed with a sneer at the corners of his mouth, and the look in his eyes was even more ironic. Sun Shuro, opposite him, heard Bai Ying's words, and his anger went straight to his head. The fighting spirit that had been suppressed in his body also surged uncontrollably at the moment. Hum. Suddenly, Sun Shuro's nose gave a cold hum like a low roar. At the same time, the palm under his sleeve robe was finally waved fiercely, and the fighting spirit in his body surged up. The majestic fighting spirit gushed out of his palm like a sea wave, sweeping all over the world. Seeing this, Bai Ying's face changed slightly. Although he was not afraid of Sun Shuro, he didn't want to conflict with him at this time. Otherwise, if the other 2 families knew about it, wouldn't they want to hinder it? If he really fought with the Sun family, the other 2 would sit on the mountain and watch the tiger. It wouldn't be a good thing. After all, the Zhuohua family is already more powerful than them. Once the Sun Bai family quarrels, won't they be even lower than the 2 in the future? With this in mind, Bai Ying can't help narrowing his eyes. The fighting spirit in the cyclone in his body also runs quietly at the moment, ready to meet Sun Shuro opposite. But then, bang! The fighting spirit swept through, turned into a long gun, and finally fell from the sky and ruthlessly inserted into the huge pit below. Sun Hun, who had fainted, was confused in the chest. The terrible giant force directly inserted Sun Hu's body into the depths of the earth. More than 10 zhong-long fighting spears were also forcibly inserted into more than half of the ground. Looking down from the surface, Sun Hu's body can no longer be seen. Only a large amount of blood splashed out under the use of the giant force and dyed the surrounding earth red. With this blow, Sun Hun, who was already as angry as a hairspring, immediately ended up. The appearance of this scene also made Bai Ying slightly stunned. Unexpectedly, Sun Shuro would finally shoot at his own people, which is something to see. A sneer came from the corner of his mouth. Bai Ying first squinted at Sun Shuro, and then looked around the courtyard. Sure enough, when Bai Ying glanced at the guards of the Sun family in the courtyard, their faces changed at the moment. They were also surprised. They didn't expect that the owner of their family would shoot at their own people, and they looked so angry. Even if Sun Hun refuted powerfully just now, under this fierce blow, I'm afraid it's also impossible to survive. My Sun family doesn't raise waste. Relying on the strength accumulated by pills, my Sun family doesn't need it, and I will never allow such people to exist. It seemed that he also noticed the changes in the guards' faces. Sun Shuro's face was cold and his tone was very low. After some words, the expression on the guard's face was relieved. Of course, I don't know what to think in my heart. Seeing this, Bai Ying couldn't help raising his eyebrows. Unexpectedly, Sun Shuo would still say such words. All his anger was added to the dead Sun Hun, who can't die anymore. This can be regarded as saving the face of his Sun family. Otherwise, if Bai Ying said this in the future, his Sun family would have no power to refute. Sun Yang, Sun Liang, do it and catch Xiao Yang. No matter what, he killed my Bai family. Today, he must not leave here. Then, Sun Shuo stepped on the ground fiercely, and the whole person immediately paced up the void. When the terrible momentum in his body broke out, a sharp drink came from his mouth. Immediately after that, standing among the crowd around Xiao Yang, several 9-star and half-emperor strong men of the Sun family changed slightly on everyone's face after hearing the order of the patriarch. You know, they just watched Xiao Yang blow a 9-star and a half-emperor to death. Now Sun Shuo asked them to do it again. The hearts of the 9-star and a half-emperors of the Sun family were more or less uneasy. After all, they don't want to end up like Sun Hun. Clan leader Sun, it seems that there is no one in the Sun family. So many 9-star and half-emperors dare not even deal with a 6-star and half-emperor. At this time, Bai Ying also opened his mouth to ridicule deliberately. At the same time, he also looked at Bai Yi again. He noticed that Bai Ying's eyes were coming. The look on Bai Yi's face could not help but change again. A bad premonition rushed up from the bottom of his heart. If you Bai family have the ability, why don't you let Bai Yi go first? That's what I mean. After all, the strength of my Bai family is obtained by practicing steadfastly, unlike some. At the end of the sentence, Bai Ying deliberately paused for a moment, then raised his eyes, smiled at Bai Yi with a smile on his mouth and said, Bai Yi, as a member of our Bai family, our clan leader attaches great importance to you. Don't let our clan leader down. Hearing the speech, Bai Yi was slightly surprised. Although he wanted to say something, he was still unable to refute it in the end. After all, the person in front of him was the head of his Bai family. His words, the whole Bai family, but no one could refute them. Don't worry. I know that Xiao Yang is powerful, so no matter what, as long as you dare to fight against him, win or lose, you won't lose my white face. When the laughter fell, Bai Ying intentionally or unintentionally turned his eyes to Sun Shuo, and the sarcasm in his eyes was even worse. At the same time, it also made the anger in the latter's heart more crazy. Hearing the speech, Bai Yi reluctantly nodded. Although the result had not changed, at least Bai Ying gave him a reason to breathe, which also made Bai Yi feel a little relaxed. Although it's uncertain whether Xiao Yang can be solved, Bai Yi can believe that if Xiao Yang wants to solve him, it's not easy. After all, Bai Yi will only be more cautious in the face of Xiao Yang with the lesson of Sun Hun. He nodded heavily, and Bai Yi took another deep breath. Immediately, the soles of his feet stepped on the ground. Suddenly, when the gravel burst, Bai Yi's body quickly shot into the sky like a loaded shell. His eyes turned, crossed the swarming crowd in the sky and landed on Xiao Yang, who turned into a King Kong giant god at the moment. Aware of his eyes, Xiao Yang also seemed to feel something. His body suddenly turned. While startling the surrounding crowd, a pair of golden domineering eyes also fell on Bai Yi in an instant. You were the one who left the Sifang pavilion. Ignoring the people around him, Xiao Yang stared at Bai Yi with fierce eyes and said in a dark tone. Hearing the speech, Bai Yi was non-committal. At the same time, his mind moved. The fighting spirit in his body immediately ran to his whole body. Immediately, with a puff, Sen's white fighting spirit rose like a flame on Bai Yi's body surface. Sen's white fighting spirit rose like a flame on the body surface of Bai Yi. The temperature between heaven and earth also gradually increased while the fighting spirit gushed out of Bai Yi. Oh, is fire fighting? Seeing this, Xiao Yang couldn't help feeling a little surprised in his eyes. He had never seen that the fighting spirit with fire attribute could turn into Mori white. In this regard, Bai Yi just snorted coldly with a dignified face, and then his body moved suddenly. When the flame flew, his body shape had disappeared in place. At the same time, most of the semi-imperial strongmen in the field also looked slightly changed. Compared with Sun Hun, Bai Yi's strength was more powerful. At least, Bai Yi didn't rely on foreign things to improve his strength. Drink. Shenyang hand. In the twinkling of an eye, Bai Yi had passed through a crowd and quickly came to Xiao Yang. With a big hand, Sen's white fighting spirit quickly condensed in the palm of his hand. After his body rotated in midair, he slapped Xiao Yang's chest in front of him. From a distance, compared with Xiao Yang, Bai Yi at the moment is like a sparrow and a person. The size of the two is almost unimaginable. The person who started first would be Bai Yi. Looking at Bai Yi at this time, the color of fear in his eyes has been reduced by more than half. He also understands that in the face of strong people like Xiao Yang, fear will only put him at a disadvantage. If he wants to defeat Xiao Yang in front of him, first of all, he must not be afraid. Otherwise, fear of life and death, how to fight. What's more, at such a close distance, when Bai Yi wants to come, Xiao Yang, who incarnates the body of King Kong and glass, must be slow. At the moment, he suddenly comes to Xiao Yang. Even with Xiao Yang's reaction, it's difficult to attack immediately. As long as he is fast enough, it is not so easy for Xiao Yang to hurt him. Unfortunately, Bai Yi's idea is obviously wrong. The Vajra glass body has been with Xiao Yang for many years. Xiao Yang is even more proficient in its usage. The original defects of the Vajra glass body have been completely made up under Xiao Yang's absolute power. Therefore, Bai Yi's actions at the moment are of no help to Xiao Yang. Hehe, good idea. Unfortunately, you're still too slow. With a slight smile in his mouth, Xiao Yang clenched his right fist fiercely. Immediately, before Bai Yi was about to drop his palm on Xiao Yang's chest, he punched out fiercely, catching up from behind, and directly hit Bai Yi. Suddenly, the sound of bone fracture was heard all the time. The look on the faces of the strong people watching the battle outside the field also changed again. No one could imagine that although a person stronger than Sun Hun was changed, he still couldn't bear Xiao Yang's punch. This guy. It's terrible. Is he really human? I'm afraid even those Warcraft who specialize in physical body can't compare with him. Bang! In addition to the horror in the hearts of the people, Bai Yi's body was also blown out by Xiao Yang. When the fighting spirit poured out, Bai Yi's body was finally forced to stop on the void. When Bai Yi paused, he immediately felt that his body seemed to be falling apart. Severe pain came from all over his body. Even if he deliberately suppressed it with fighting spirit, it could not have much effect. Damn. This guy, his real strength, is far more than that. At the same time, Bai Yi couldn't help looking at Bai Ying in the distance behind him. At this time, only he can decide his future. Bai Yi, the face of my Bai family will be entrusted to you. Hold him. Just wait another half an hour, and then you can rest. When you get back to the family, I will reward you with 2/3 order pills. Seeing Bai Yi's eyes, Bai Ying also said solemnly to him. Smell speech. With the temptation of the pill, Bai Yi immediately felt a hot feeling in his heart. Even if he poured out all his money, he could get one at most, but unexpectedly, his owner opened his mouth and there were two. As soon as his eyes turned, Bai Yi immediately turned his eyes back to Xiao Yang. The depths of his eyes were full of fire and heat. He really wanted to fight for the 2/3 order pills. Drink. Xiao Yang, come again. With an angry drink, Bai Yi suddenly moved and ignored the injury in his body. In a twinkling of an eye, he had dodged in the void and came behind Xiao Yang. With a wave of his big hand, a broad knife suddenly fell into his hand. The fighting spirit condensed. The broad knife scattered dazzling white light under the package of Senbai's fighting spirit. At the same time, the temperature between heaven and earth also increased again. Drink. Blazing knife cut. The anger fell, and the broadsword also fell quickly. When Xiao Yang shot, a knife fell on Xiao Yang's back. As soon as the blow fell, Bai Yi's body twinkled again, while Xiao Yang stood steadily on the void, waved his hands constantly, and took over all the fighting skills Bai Yi showed. Seeing this scene, all the people were shocked by Xiao Yang's shocking move. You know, as a 9.5-star emperor, Bai Yi's own strength is strong and terrible. If you add all kinds of human-level fighting skills, once they are displayed, the power of terror is described as destroying the sky and the earth. I'm afraid it's not too much. However, at the moment, in the face of these human-level fighting skills that are enough to move all the semi-imperial strong men, Xiao Yang forcibly smashed them with the domineering power of Vajra glass with all his physical strength. Watching the scenes happening in front of them, the emotions in the hearts of all the people present have reached an indescribable level. They even doubt that Xiao Yang in front of them is really human. He is really a semi-emperor, really just a 6-star semi-emperor. Above the sky, the broadsword is waved, and there are shocking terrorist fighting skills. Under the strength of Bai Yi's 9.5-star emperor, his powerful power is fully displayed. In a short moment, Bai Yi has fully displayed his unique knowledge all his life. More than 10 kinds of powerful fighting skills are constantly shooting wantonly in Bai Yi's hands. Except that some of them are resisted by Xiao Yang with fighting spirit, most of them are fought by Xiao Yang in the most violent way. With a body of King Kong, they are almost one fist and one person. No matter how hard Bai Yi exerts his fighting skills, no matter how crazy the fighting spirit in his body is, what he finally gets is Xiao Yang's usual punch. Under Xiao Yang's fist, it seems that all attacks are in vain. Thorn la la. Mars was everywhere, and the broadsword hit Xiao Yang's arm hard again. However, the result was that Xiao Yang shocked him with great force, and then the broadsword flew out hard. Together with Bai Yi's body, it flew back uncontrollably. Seeing this scene, the people outside the court were surprised again. They didn't know how many times Xiao Yang had blown Bai Yi out. But one thing was clear to the people present. Even up to now, in the process of fighting with Bai Yi, Xiao Yang, as the protagonist, still hadn't displayed a fighting skill. This alone is enough to prove Xiao Yang's strength. Holding back the numbness from his arms, Bai Yi's face was dignified, and the fighting spirit left in his body poured out of his body. As soon as his wrist rotated, he grasped the handle of the knife again, and the soles of his feet stepped on the void. In a twinkling of an eye, he disappeared again. Then the next moment, the broadsword appeared over Xiao Yang's head. At this time, Bai Yi, however, disappeared. Drink. Try my famous fighting skill. Suddenly, the whole heaven and earth echoed the shrill cry of white leaves. At the same time, the broadsword appeared above Xiao Yang's head. With a puff, the forest white fighting flame suddenly rose, and the fire soared into the sky, straight through the sky, and its breath quickly became terrible. Red practice soul-breaking knife. When the breath on the broadsword condensed to an extremely terrible degree, the hoarse low voice in Bai Yi's mouth also suddenly came out, roaring like thunder, shaking the world. At the same time, the broad knife with the forest white flame all over the body was shocked suddenly. Under the outbreak of terrible power, the surrounding void collapsed in an instant. At this moment, the broad knife, with the terrible momentum of destroying the sky and the earth, fell mercilessly against Xiao Yang directly below. Feel the terrible breath on the broadsword, and the look on the faces of the people around can't help but change in an instant. Even the 9-star and half-emperors in the field can't help showing a dignified color on their faces. On the other side, Bai Ying sees that Bai Yi is forced to do his best by Xiao Yang, but his face shows a look of surprise. Hum. However, at this time, Xiao Yang suddenly gave a cold hum. His body was shocked. On the body surface, gorgeous fire suddenly condensed out. The terrible high temperature immediately made the air between heaven and earth become dry and abnormal. Everyone nearby also quickly retreated with a sudden change of face. Xiao Yang raised his head. A pair of golden eyes stared at the broadsword falling rapidly above his head. His heart was cold. This white leaf really aroused the anger in his heart. Drink. Suddenly, Xiao Yang's mouth also gave an earth-shaking fierce drink. At the same time, with a sudden grasp of his big hand, the gorgeous strange fire quickly condensed in Xiao Yang's palm. In the twinkling of an eye, it condensed into a huge flame ruler. There was no pause. At the moment when the flame giant ruler condensed, Xiao Yang shook his arm with the palm of the giant ruler, and the giant ruler suddenly became empty. At the same time, a breath of terror and destruction that was not weaker than the former was also quickly uploaded from the flame giant ruler. 7 broken sky feet. 1 foot. He drank fiercely in his heart. Then, the giant ruler in Xiao Yang's hand fiercely crossed the void. The powerful force made the giant ruler sweep through the void. At the same time, the whole heaven and earth were destroyed together and turned into a dark and profound endless void. Immediately, the faces of all the people present changed greatly. No one could have imagined that Xiao Yang in front of him was so terrible that he waved it casually. It was a human-level fighting skill. This guy is really just a half-emperor. He is indeed a half-emperor, but he has far more power than these ordinary half-emperors. Whether it is the refinement of fighting spirit in his body or the understanding of fighting skills, he has reached the extreme. It is very dangerous to be an opponent with such people. Unless he can be sure to kill him completely, the whole western region will be destroyed. When he grows up, no one is an opponent. Tut tut. He can be chased and killed by 4 major sects together. He is really not comparable to ordinary people. Hey, when he was half-emperor, he had such terrible combat power. If he reached the real level of fighting emperor, wouldn't he have to fight with the strong ones returning to the source territory? Outside, several strong fighters watching the battle in the distance couldn't help but tut and marvel. Xiao Yang in front of them was much more terrible than they thought. Even if they were able to break out such a powerful force with the strength of the 6-star and half-emperor, it was equally incredible. The White family is going to lose. A strong fighter stared at the huge ruler in Xiao Yang's hand and felt the terrible destructive power on it. Even with his nature, he couldn't help shaking his eyebrows. And then the next moment, the gorgeous ruler and Orn swept out from the huge ruler of the flame. Everywhere they passed, the void around them collapsed instantaneously. Everyone outside also retreated quickly and violently at this moment. No one wanted to be affected by this terrible force. In the distance, Bai Ying's eyes narrowed and stared at Xiao Yang in the field. The touch in his heart was unimaginable. Even he did not expect that Xiao Yang, a half-emperor, had become so powerful. As for Sun Shuro on his side, his face at the moment is more solemn than a sneer. Few people can be treated by him with this kind of eyes. Even the other 3 patriarchs of the 4 families can't do it. At the moment, Xiao Yang completely subverts his cognition of the semi-emperor strong. He never thought that a district and semi-emperor can erupt such terrible power. This boy. He must not leave here today, Sun Shuro screamed in his heart. At the same time, a pair of palms under his sleeve robe are also slowly clenched. The fighting spirit in his body runs quietly, but all this is also detected by Bai Ying, who has been monitoring him. Boom! The earth-shaking explosion was like an invisible storm. Although it did not have any substantive power, it also made everyone in Hanshi City look crazy at the moment. Many weaker people burst their eardrums under this roar, and blood gushed out of their ears with severe pain. Everyone's faces were also ferocious and painful. Even those 9-star and half-emperors turned pale at the moment. The terrorist power contained in the broadsword was reduced by more than half at the moment of bombarding with the Kai Mang. It was not until the White Leaf, who didn't know where he was, consumed his fighting spirit madly, that he stabilized it. However, it could compete with Xiao Yang's Kai Mang, which was far from enough to break it. At this time, Bai Yi's heart fully understood how terrible Xiao Yang's actual strength was. I'm afraid no one can match him except fighting the Emperor. However, at the moment, even though he has awakened, it is too late to open the bow without turning back. Now he either tries his best to fight with Xiao Yang, or he will be seriously injured or even die. Damn it! Spell it! Bai Yi clenched his teeth and madly urged the few fighting spirits in his body. A pale face became red again. Even his white eyes were also full of scarlet color at the moment. However, although Bai Yi tried his best, everything he did was still useless in front of Xiao Yang. 7 feet, 2 feet. The indifferent low cry reminded Xiao Yang at the bottom of his heart. Without waiting for this blow, the ruler Orn fell. Then, another ruler shot out from the huge ruler in Xiao Yang's hand, and in the twinkling of an eye, it instantly fused with the previous ruler Orn. Suddenly, the terrible power on the foot Orn became more terrible at the moment. Just for a moment, there was a clear click on the broadsword wrapped in fighting spirit. Immediately after that, a metal fragment the size of a palm suddenly burst out from the broadsword. Puff! At the same time, Bai Yi seemed to feel the same way. She couldn't help but spit out a big mouthful of blood. The whole person's breath became weak in an instant. 3 feet. In this regard, Xiao Yang was merciless. With a wave of a huge ruler in his hand and another foot Orn, he swept away with the horror of destroying the sky and the earth. Bang! This time, different from just now, under Xiao Yang's blow, the fusion of 3 feet and man's almost destroyed the withered and decadent, so he completely smashed the broad knife. Get out, otherwise, the next time you break, it will be your head. The words like thunder echoed endlessly between the heaven and earth. At this moment, the words in Xiao Yang's mouth echoed in everyone's mind, and everyone's heart was filled with horror and panic. Who? Slowly spit out a breath. Xiao Yang turned around and glanced unconsciously at Bai Ying and Sun Shuro standing on the void in the distance. He couldn't help tightening his heart. Those two are real strong fighters against the Emperor. Once they fight, Xiao Yang has no way to go back. Just now they have solved Sun Hun, they just want to frighten the surrounding people. If they continue to drag on, it will not be a good thing for Xiao Yang. With this in mind, Xiao Yang was too lazy to pay attention to Bai Yi. His eyes fiercely swept other people around him. However, anyone who looked at Xiao Yang couldn't help but tremble back. After a cold glance, Xiao Yang wanted to fly out of Hanshi City in the void. Seeing this, Bai Ying, who stood on the void, looked a little changed in his eyes. He didn't want Xiao Yang to run away at this time. He had to find a way to stop him. With this in mind, Bai Ying turns her eyes and looks at Bai Yi again. Unfortunately, the latter is at the end of a powerful crossbow at the moment. It is impossible to have the strength to stop Xiao Yang. This can't help but make Bai Ying feel helpless. The time hasn't come. If Xiao Yang leaves at the moment, it's not a good thing for him. Stop. You can't leave here today. However, at this time, Sun Shuo, who was beside Bai Ying, suddenly gave a cold hum. At the same time, a more terrible momentum and pressure immediately covered the sky of the whole Hanshi city. The strong fighting spirit quickly condensed into a barrier around Xiao Yan and stopped the footsteps that wanted to leave under his feet. This video will end here.